Hello and welcome back to another book learning video. You might notice that things look a little different. I am just working on my branding and giving notice of trademark on the I Quit My Job to Help You Quit Yours. That is the name of the book that came out, and yes, I am getting that all up in the branding. So, that is not what we're here to talk about today, but just figured I'd mention that. Today we're looking at The Self-Made Billionaire Effect by John Sviokla. Man, how do you say that? Sviokla? And Mitch Cohen. How Extreme Producers Create Massive Value. Pretty good title, right? Though, it's very catchy with words like billionaire, extreme, and massive. There's one word in here that means more than its face value, and that's producers. So first, let's take a little marketing lesson from the attention-grabbing nature of the title. Then, let's talk about how this book says there are two kinds of people in the world: producers and performers. We'll get more into how the author defined these and what it really means for you, but I'll just say that in the language that I'm used to, producers are entrepreneurs and performers are employees. But before we get into that, all that detail around that, let's look at a quote from the book. Howard Aiken said, "Don't worry about people stealing an idea. If it's original, you'll have to ram it down their throats." In other words, you don't even want an original idea. That's what it sounds like he's saying, right? Maybe that's taking it a little too far, but he's trying to remove the fear that a lot of people have around their, billion-dollar idea. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see it, but, Tai Lopez puts this in perspective as well when he says that if someone can steal your idea and your entire business strategy, for that matter, from you, just from you uttering one sentence, then it would have happened once you launched the business anyway. Now, if you have some real intellectual property that you've developed, then by all means protect it. I kind of led into that with my branding and trademark notice because I'm starting to build a brand around that, so I want to protect it. But don't worry about missing out before you've even started something. So let's look at what we'll talk about today. We're going to cover these three golden nuggets. One, we'll get into more detail on the producers and performers that I mentioned already, how to identify them, and how you can benefit from understanding the difference. Second, we'll talk about the concept of eat what you kill, which has to do with rewarding people according to the value they add. And three, the third one, there's a fascinating concept called prospect theory that can help a lot of people get over the fear of big decisions like leaping from employee to entrepreneur, the one I always talk about, right? I recognize there's a lot of fear around that, and I'm going to help you get over it. All right, so starting with producers and performers. My compartmentalization of them as entrepreneurs and employees is a bit oversimplified. And here's how the book actually talks about them. Producers envision something new, bring together the people and the resources to create it, and sell it to customers who didn't know they needed it. Performers are talented people who excel at optimizing within known systems. They're often very good at what they do, but they're celebrated and elevated precisely because they perform so well in one arena. Now, these upcoming ideas around these two aren't out of the book, but I think of the difference between the two with three opposites. That's what you see right here. Producers generally have more broad knowledge, so they're able to see relationships and make connections. But performers have the deep level of knowledge in a specific area to make them true experts. Producers are able to step back and see the overall vision that they have for their organization, but performers are necessary to execute day in and day out to achieve that vision. And last, producers are better at developing strategies to achieve goals, but performers develop the ideal tactics to really drive towards them. I hope those three kind of give you a little perspective. At least that's how I see the difference between the two. And we really need to recognize that we are all producers and performers. This is not one or the other. But we probably fall closer to one end of the spectrum. What will help you the most is to be aware of your own strengths and play to them. You can bring up your weaknesses enough so that you don't get in trouble, but you can also learn where you might be better off finding a partner or an employee. The concept, eat what you kill, wasn't all that abstract a few hundred years ago. Before grocery stores and fine dining, if you didn't hunt, you didn't eat, right? Except for berries and nuts and such, but you get my point here, right? So, in business, this is now most associated with salespeople. They're paid on commission, which means they get a percentage, or sometimes a flat amount, but of every sale they make. Nowadays, salespeople also receive a base salary usually, but their compensation will vary a lot based on how well they perform. If they sell nothing, they don't make much. And my mentor Bill, who's a CFO, used to say that he wanted the salespeople to make more than him, because that meant the business would profit and he'd be in good shape in the end. What's the old saying? A rising tide lifts all boats, right? The idea here is to compensate people based on the value they add to the business. And if done properly, the business will succeed, because if someone made $50,000, it's because they added $100,000 to the business, just as a very simple example, right? The problem is that it isn't always easy. With salespeople, it's generally clear the value they're adding to the business because it's measured in dollars sold. But what about a business development person, for example? Or worse yet, an accountant? What about a research and development scientist? While it's not always easy, good management creates metrics to measure the value each individual is adding to the business, so employees are incentivized to add more. I know that's a lot. Hope that makes sense. The final golden nugget is a really neat one called prospect theory. Nobel Prize winners Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky came up with this theory to describe the subjective nature of risk. So it's not objective, it's not black and white. Risk is not this or that, it is subjective. Basically, the theory argues that individual perception of risk depends on how an opportunity is framed, the context, personal experience, and other factors. One of the key ideas that this theory introduced is called loss aversion, which says that people are more afraid of losing what they have than they are eager to gain something new. This is illustrated amazingly by people I've met who aren't happy in their jobs, but they don't want to change careers because they would have to take a pay cut. I mean, even when I phrase it to them as, so you'd rather make $10K per year more for the next couple of years than do something that you think will actually make you happy, it still seems like too big of a risk to them. This is loss aversion, and it's pretty dangerous. Usually, the fear of the unknown and losing what we're comfortable with seems like too high a risk. So here's what you really want. Here's how you can beat this sad limitation of our brain. Jeff Bezos was making six figures when he considered starting Amazon. He knew he wouldn't make much money initially, so he would be sacrificing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he was even going to borrow some money from his parents. The way he got over loss aversion was the fear of regret, right? I guess sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. You have to fight fear with fear here. He figured he could always get another job and pay his parents back and make more money and all that good stuff. But when he was old and gray, he'd look back and know that he went after his dreams. I try to take calculated risks, but if the math checks out and I'm still afraid for some reason, I use what I'll call the old person theory. When we're 80 years old, we're not going to care if our house is 3-bedroom instead of 4, or our car goes 150 instead of 200, right? We're going to care about what we went after in life and the experiences and memories we created. Okay? And that is the summary for today. Don't get caught always thinking that the grass is greener. That can be dangerous too. But if you truly think you'll be happier doing something else, you have to be willing to take the leap. Just like that guy, jumping away from brown desert into lush green, right? Okay, so lastly, let's move on to the exercises. Answer these, comment on these, get thinking, get a dialogue going. So number 1, what percentage are you producer and performer? In other words, where do you lie on the spectrum? Maybe you feel like you're pretty evenly both. Maybe you feel like you're 90% a producer and, executing comes a little harder for you, but you do a little bit of that. If you can understand where you fall on that spectrum, that's going to help you a lot in your future work, in your partnerships, in business in general. Number 2, are you compensated based on your value? Could you be? I think this is most commonly going to be no. Salaries and hourly wages are extremely common these days. So even if you're not, think of a way that you could be paid based on how much value you actually add to your business. If you think about it and you actually come up with a good idea, it might be a way to suggest something to your business and show that both you want to be on the same page and do well when the business does well, and you might be able to make more that way. And number 3, lastly, what will you regret if you don't do it out of fear? I really want people to think about that. I do. I know that it's not the things that we don't do that we regret. It's not the things we do that we regret. Everybody does some stupid stuff in their life, but it's the stuff that we don't do that we really wish we had taken the risk and taken the leap for. Okay? Answer those questions. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you want to see in the future and all that good stuff. And I can't wait to see you all next time.